Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. I am back again. Still tired. Still needing 3 sugars in his coffee. And wishing that he could get up a lot sooner. But, again, that's not why you called. I'd also say that I've come into the new year with a clean bill of health, but with 2 strokes already under my belt, I'd say that's extremely unlikely. But I digress. Let's talk about Tommy Robinson and a couple of other things when they come to mind, because obviously my brain is going into boot up mode. I think it's still using Windows XP. Anyway, Tommy Robinson apparently has been denied the right to go into a free, open prison, which is his right as a Category D prisoner. Now, apparently, they say as the excuse that they are using this prison as an excuse to basically ensure they can keep their gagging orders and what have you, and to make sure that it's not an inconvenience for them. Because obviously, they don't give a shit about us little people. They would sooner toast a marshmallow over us rather than actually care for our needs. Like, they have no right to treat Tommy Robinson like this. And I will remind them once again, like I did in my last video, that every single day that he's going by and he is not being given anything other than canned tuna, they are breaching Article 3 of the Human Rights Act. Torture. So, I would remind the prison governor, if he or she is watching, and there are only 2 genders, yeah, fucking sue me. There are only 2 genders, and if you're watching this, just remember, if you're not giving him the nutritional needs that he requires, you're breaching that right. I wonder how you would like it in prison if you were only sitting on canned tuna. You'd be crying for your mothers, just like that. You know why? Because none of you have got the balls, whether up here or down there, or in my case both, to be able to take this kind of thing. To be fair, I probably wouldn't be able to stay in there like that for very long, because I would want to have decent fucking food. Hell, even if I just get, I don't know, some nice minestrone soup, I'll at least be bloody happy. At least I'm getting something else in my daily meal, or daily life, or whatever. Jesus Christ. Ugh. Pain in the fucking arse is what it is. I wonder if any of the officers in those prisons would recognise me. Oh, look, it's Arthur. No, my name's not Arthur. No, it is Arthur Job. Fuck off. Anyway, the point is, Tommy Robinson should be in an open prison. He should be getting more visitation, and he certainly should have a lot more rights than what he has right now, because he is a Category D prisoner. If he was a terrorist, if he was a murderer, then yeah, he would be quite rightly placed in a Category A or Category B prison. But he's not a terrorist. He is merely a journalist who is reporting on things that clearly Keir the Traitor Starmer would rather not have reported, would rather not have exposed, if you will. The cold, bitter truth is, for Keir the Traitor Starmer, everything is going to come out into the open before too much longer. Think about it. We have the trial of Ricky Cutthroat Jones, Mike assaulting Amesbury, and we have got Axel child murderer Radakabana about to hit the trials on the 20th of January. Coincidence, stroke number 1. Coincidentally, on the same day that Donald Trump is supposed to be inaugurated. And their plan is, and this is not new news, because I've already mentioned this before in the last year, but They're basically doing this, in my humble opinion, to bury Donald Trump under that, because there'll be so much stuff to cover. There'll be 3 trials. How are we supposed to cover everything? How are the mainstream media supposed to distribute their resources? Oh, there's clearly only 3 things, not 4. That's their mentality. But no, there are 4 things that we can cover, and if the mainstream media won't fucking cover it, we will. And remember, the mainstream media is no longer trusted. The mainstream media are not the mainstream. We are. We're the ones who are able to put the truth out there. We're the ones that people flock into to see what the hell's going on, other than seeing a guy at 19 stone having more strokes than the Oxford rowing team. Anyway, they're coming in to see the real news. They're not coming in to see propaganda mouthpieces, because that's effectively what they are, spew nonsense. They're not journalists. I've mentioned this so many times. They're not journalists, they're fucking activists. They do not qualify as journalists. They qualify about as stroke number 2. They qualify as adequately for the title of journalist as I do for the title of gym instructor. They are not worthy of being called journalists. And I know that bill of health is really looking bad. 4 strokes already, and we're only 2 days in. Christ almighty. But I digress. Keir the Traitor Starmer's dirty little secret over how he covered up the Southport riots. Well, it's not even really that secret, is it, to be fair, considering everyone knows about it. But when the trial goes ahead on the 20th, everything is going to come out into the open. Everything. And yes, I did call, and I nearly had another stroke, bloody hell, call Axel child-murdering Radakabana a child murderer. I have assumed guilt. You know why? Because it's kind of hard to avoid guilt, to avoid being guilty when several dozen fucking witnesses have seen you kill 3 beautiful children. But of course the mainstream media won't tell you this. You know the drill, folks, because say it with me. It doesn't suit the narrative. No, they'd rather focus on how he was a beautiful Welsh choir boy from Cardiff. Yeah, he's about as Welsh as my backside. He has no right to be called a Welsh choir boy. He does not belong in the Welsh community. He does not even belong in the Norwich community. He doesn't belong in any community, quite frankly. I mean, when it's already come out, before they put a gagging order out, everything I'm saying is in the public domain. When it comes out, again, that he had ricin in his home. As said, this has already been stated in the public domain. But when it comes out that he had ricin in his home, and he had a military manual of Al-Qaeda, basically, showing that he is basically a terrorist, and then people find out about this during the trial, what do you think their reaction's going to be? It's all going to go up. This is all a massive powder keg, and not even just that. This is a powder keg with a lit fucking fuse. It just so happens the fuse is about 18 days long right now. But when that powder keg goes off, oh my God, Keir the Traitor Starmer's done for. His career will be cooked, just like that. There is no way he will be able to stay in power. Because one of 2 things is going to happen. Either he's going to have to resign, or the people will overthrow him. Simple as that. They will not call for this. They will not stand for this. How many people has he libelously slandered as far right, as thugs? How many people has he slandered that were merely protesting on the streets? And let me be clear, I do not condone overthrowing governments through force. I do not condone violent revolution. I do not condone rioting or looting or pillaging. I do not condone that. And I never will. I will completely understand, however, if people decide that's the route they want to go down, though. And that is simply because I personally see it that this traitor has to go. There isn't any shot this man can stay in power, because if he does, we're all screwed. Think about it. He's also trying to rejoin us to the EU. You know, the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels who hadn't paid off their accounts. This is something I forgot to mention before in several videos, by the way. They hadn't even signed off their accounts for 20 years. How do you explain that? A bureaucracy that hasn't even signed their accounts. 20 years. If it was maybe a couple of years, maybe people could let it slide. But when it's 20, surely there are alarm bells going off. Surely someone's clanging that bell going, what the fuck's going on here? But no, nobody argues that. Do you know what? There's only one person who ever mentioned this shit whilst we were part of the EU. Nigel Farage. He was the only one who had the guts to call this out and call the EU the mafia, which is exactly what they were. They were behaving like the mafia. But again, the mainstream media won't tell you that. But back on point, Keir the Traitor Starmer is on borrowed time. Forget about the AI channels that you've seen, because they seem to be springing up a hell of a lot more now. There seems to be so many blatant clickbait title AI content channels. You need to watch yourself on those. I think I've had to block at least a dozen or so over the last few days. The amount of times that I see them saying that Starmer's about to resign soon, when I don't even know whenabouts he will resign. But what I do know, as I said, is when that Southport trial goes live, when everything gets put out in the open, and people find out that they were right in what they were saying, and that Keir the Traitor Starmer basically tried to shut them up, when they find out he tried to shut them up, his career's over. Simple as that. There isn't any way he'll be able to stay in power. If he doesn't resign, the people will force him to. They will overthrow him, which I cannot justify at all. I cannot justify it. I will not justify it. But I will understand why they do it. They're not going to stand for this. They're not going to stand for a dictator, or maybe I was right first time, who has effectively tried to crush dissent, who has tried to silence the the silent majority, who has tried to shaft his own people in the sakes of DEI, and to do everything he can to protect the Muslim community, because that was one of his first messages that he ever said as Prime Minister. Never forget that. I sure as shit won't let him forget that. Hell, if Keir the Traitor Starmer ended walking... stroke number 3. If he ended up walking through Norwich and I saw him, I'd let him fucking know about it. I assure you. Unlike a lot of people who might be typing away on their keyboards like keyboard warriors, wonder what their shield's going to be. Surely they can't hold the keyboard as a sword. because I'll end up giving him a good kick in the balls. Anyway, when he comes down, I'm not afraid to say it how it is in front of him. Unlike a lot of people who type away, I will have the guts to say this shit in front of him. I will have the guts to call him a sectarianist bastard, because that is exactly what he is. He has prioritised protecting a minority group, akin to how the oligarchy protects its special sponsored groups, basically. He has made it his priority to protect them rather than do his civic duty to the people of Britain. Now, he has no right to do that. He must protect the realm and its inhabitants. Those are his two basic duties. And if he can't do them, what fucking good is he as a Prime Minister? Not very prime, is he? Not very prime at all. I'd say a very crap minister. The crap minister of Britain. Though it doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? I suppose that's why they have to call him Prime Minister, because it doesn't really have the same ring to it as crap minister, does it? But I digress. The bottom line, as far as Keir the Traitor Starmer is, he can sit there and bark his orders like Stalin or Hitler, and that is who he most closely resembles, Adolf Hitler, because he's a socialist, a left-winger, and he is a fascist. Pure and simple. Remember, Hitler, do not be deceived by the mainstream media, because they are trying to rewrite history. And they got an F on their test. Anyway, they are trying to rewrite history and say Adolf Hitler was far right. When he was actually a far left socialist fascist. That is something the mainstream media will do everything they can to make sure you don't hear. Because if the British people ever find out that Hitler was actually a left-wing socialist rather than right-wing, again, it's going to blow the lid off a whole load of things. Because it's a myth they've basically shoved in our faces for God knows how long. How much do you think the British people are going to tolerate that shit? How do you think the older generation are going to tolerate that shit? They're not going to. They're going to be like, well, hang on, if they lied about Adolf Hitler, then what else have they lied about? As I said, this is why the mainstream media are no longer trusted. That is why they go to people like Dan Wootton, like Patrick Christie's, like Richard Inman, like Maya Toosey, like Tommy Robinson, because they know they'll get the truth from them. Or at least they won't get some propaganda bullshit from the mouthpiece of the establishment. This is why we're winning the war, folks. It's not just about going onto the battlefield and slaying soldiers and blowing up bunkers and tanks and what have you. It's also potentially winnable through the hearts and the minds. If we have the hearts and the minds of the people, then the establishment is powerless. And what it will boil down to with this trial of the child murderer Radakabana and the others is they will plan to bury Trump's inauguration. But I will tell you this much. I am going to be doing everything I can. On the 20th of January, I'll be doing a live stream. And I will be covering every single topic. I will be covering child murderer Radakabana. I'll be talking about Ricky Cutthroat Jones. I'll be talking about Mike assaulting pensioners Amesbury. And I'll be talking about Donald Trump as well. Because, believe it or not, it's not hard to actually do your job and report on multiple things. The mainstream media would have you believe it's very, very difficult. But considering they're a large fucking organisation with a substantial number of what they call so-called journalists, it shouldn't be very hard for any of them to be able to cover 4 places. Surely. But what would I know, being a 34-year-old, 2-people person? What would I know? Will the mainstream media stop lying to us and actually do the reporting on all 4 cases? Or are they going to try and bury Trump? I think it's likely going to be the latter. But if they do, we need to make sure we cover all 4 of those platforms, all 4 of those bits of news. Because if they won't, we have to. We have to make sure they know the truth, that we know the truth. Because otherwise, like history, it'll get buried. And they will try to rewrite it. Remember, Joe the old biddy Biden gave a presidential pardon to his son after all the crimes he committed. After he had one time tweeted out on X that nobody is above the law, regarding Trump, by the way. So apparently he thought he was above the law. He even thinks he's above the law now when he is basically doing everything he can to sabotage relationships with Russia and the United States. When he's basically attacked Russia with, was it shadow missiles? I think I recall seeing something about shadow missiles. Which, obviously, if Trump was there, he wouldn't be just going for the nuclear option. He's not impulsive. Sometimes you could say he's a bit of an idiot. But I don't think he would be the person that would be like, you know what? Fuck it. Launch the nukes. I don't think he's that kind of person. Quite frankly. They sabotaged his position. So that then he would be struggling to get back on good terms with Russia. And it's a disgusting move, quite frankly. Trump has had 3 assassination attempts. And the left glorified the violence. None of them have been arrested. Or at least a very select handful have been arrested. And nothing more. But when we ever speak close to inciting violence, which I do not condone or recommend or justify, then we all get locked up in an instant. They'll have wagons outside our houses. Just like that. Begs the question. Why? Why is it the media seems so incapable of calling out this violence when it's on the left? They're so incapable of calling out wrongdoings when it's on the left side. But when it's the right wing, they're like, oh, you see, they're far right, they're racist, they're violent, they're football hooligans, they're thugs and all that shit. Madness. Absolute madness. And I didn't even realise that window there is actually coming through and shining through the window, so that's my bad. I'll try my best to stay here. After all, I make a good obstruction. But, yeah, Tommy Robinson shouldn't be in a closed prison. He should be in an open prison. He shouldn't be in solitary confinement for 21 fucking hours a day. He should not be living off of cans of tuna every single day. He has at least been given access to a gym, which I suppose is something. But it doesn't change the fact that Tommy Robinson is being treated like a prisoner of war, not a Category D prisoner. He is not a war crimes prisoner. If anyone deserves to be in prison for war crimes, I would probably say it's Tony the War Criminal Blair and Keir the Traitor Starmer, and of course, Sadiq terrorist sympathiser Khan. I'd say those 3 people are very fitting for a prison like that, where they spend 21 hours a day in solitary confinement, treated as a war criminal. But of course, we'll never see that. Because after all, the oligarchy protects one another. If they're looking after themselves, nothing will happen to them. That's the way I look at it. Of course, if we the people take control of the government, we can have them locked up. We can take out the trash, as it were, and place it in the dustbin of history where it rightfully belongs. But until such time, they will run amok. It's criminals leading criminals. That's why we have the Criminal Protection Service. Crown Prosecution Service. Or again, maybe I was right first time, where they let the nonces and the killers go free while they persecute political prisoners like you and me for saying mean things on the internet, for recording the Southport riots or the aftermath of them. That's why Peter Lynch, God rest his soul, was sent to jail, because he had the audacity to do the horrendous crime of shouting at police. You horrible little wrong'un. Yeah, real wrong'un, wasn't he? How dare he shout at the police, as is Article 10 of the Human Rights Act, the right to protest and have the right to free speech. How dare he do such a thing? Of course, what was I thinking in my 2020 vision? What was I thinking? Believing that Peter Lynch was innocent. What was I thinking? How horrendous is it to shout at police? Fuck right off. Fuck right off. If this is how you treat your people, don't be surprised if in the very near future there is a revolution. As I said in the last video, if you try to call the army in, over half of the army said that they would turn on you rather than support you. And that was when Boris the Clown Johnson was in power, who, as I said before, I would argue, I think is a little more influential and a little more, he's a little more respectable than Keir the Traitor Starmer. I reckon the number of people who would turn on Keir the Traitor Starmer would be closer to 80%. I reckon he'd only have a fifth of the army at best. And I'm being really fucking generous right now. I think a lot of the army would see what he's doing and they would turn on him in an instant. This is not a war you'll win, Traitor Starmer. You can try and fight this war all you want. But the bottom line is, whether we do this with a peaceful resolution or a violent revolution, you're fucking cooked. I'm talking 200 degrees in the oven, 15 minutes, ding. You're fucking cooked, Starmer. There ain't any shot you are coming out of this in one piece. You'll be lucky if you come out in several pieces. Frankly, I think you're going to be finely chopped, grated, and then discarded. Quite frankly. I only hope the chef can make a good meal out of him. Though, the trouble is, he's probably about as nutritional as a dead skunk. This man has to go. The man is a parasite, in it for power and glory and money, serving his WEF, the World Economic Forum, and Davos. Last time I checked, those two weren't very good for us. Last time I checked, I don't see any positive things that have come out of those fucking shills, those dictators, those dictasters and the bureaucrats who have no respect for us. You won't win this war, Starmer. You won't, whether peacefully or violently. We will take back this country. And you will have to pay the price for your actions. Because I guarantee you, there are so many people who want you in a jail cell. There are so many people out there. You are more wanted than Tony Blair. And that's fucking saying something, considering he sent soldiers to their deaths on a false war. I think people would be much more interested in seeing you in prison versus Tony the War Criminal Blair, because of how much damage you have done to this country. Like, you can replace soldiers. You can get soldiers back. But you can't get back the time that these traitors have spent in power doing damage to the country. And I'd say Keir the Traitor Starmer has done substantial damage in the last 7 months. Quite frankly, I don't think that is a man I want ever in power again. And I think I'd probably say at least a quarter of this population want you in jail, Starmer. Keir the Traitor Starmer. Keir the stroke number 4. I'm really not going into this with a clean bill, am I? He has got a quarter of the population who are calling for his blood, basically. He has got a quarter of the population who want to see him in a cell. Ideally, I think if we all had our way, he'd be hanging right now. He'd be swinging from the gallows like a pendulum. Because I think that's what traitors deserve, quite frankly. Do you know what they did to traitors in World War II? Bang. Dead. They shot them. Because anybody who was willing to run away from the front line was untrustworthy at best, and at worst, a liability. I reckon Keir the Traitor Starmer would have been one of the first people to run if he was in World War II. In fact, no, I know for a fact he would run, because he's a coward. He's a snake. He hides behind his guards. He hides behind his power. He hides behind 10 Downing Street. It's his little shield, his little bubble. What happens when you take him out of the bubble? That's one question we'd all love to find out.